I'm a retired teacher, and in 2023, I discovered something that shattered my 40-year marriage. This is my story. My name's Margaret, and up until last year, I thought I had a pretty good handle on life. I'm a retired high school English teacher, spent 35 years grading papers and trying to make Shakespeare exciting for teenagers. My husband, Robert, and I have been married for 40 years. We've got two grown kids, Sarah and Michael, both with families of their own now. I always pictured us as that couple, the ones who made it through the tough stuff, who still laughed at each other's bad jokes. We had traditions, like our yearly beach trips or decorating the Christmas tree with the same old ornaments. That was us, happy, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the small cracks that were forming over the years. The way Robert would sometimes stare out the window with this distant look in his eyes, how he'd flinch slightly when I touched him unexpectedly. The business trips that got longer and more frequent as time went on. It's easy to miss what you're not looking for. We met in college, both English majors with dreams of writing the next great American novel. I still remember the first time I saw him in our Victorian literature class, leaning forward in his chair, so intense about his interpretation of Jane Eyre. He had this way of speaking that made you want to listen. Dark curly hair that fell across his forehead, wire-rimmed glasses that magnified his deep brown eyes. I was smitten from day one. Our relationship blossomed quickly and intensely. We spent countless nights deep in conversation about literature and philosophy, smuggled cheap wine onto the campus lawn to stargaze during meteor showers, and exchanged love letters laced with literary allusions. A year after graduating, we married in a modest ceremony in my parents' backyard. We were young, confident, and full of dreams about the life we planned to create. Those first years were modest, but joyful. Robert took a job at a publishing house, and I taught at a small private school. We made do in a tiny apartment furnished with hand-me-downs and filled with ambitions that exceeded our budget. Sarah was born 3 years in, and Michael followed 2 years later. Though we put our dreams of writing novels on hold to prioritize mortgage payments and saving for college, we never regretted it. This was the life we had chosen, the family we built. As the children grew, our careers flourished as well. I transitioned into the public school system and eventually settled at Westfield High, where I spent the majority of my teaching years. Robert advanced steadily, rising to the role of acquisitions editor, complete with a corner office and frequent business trips to New York and Chicago. I never doubted Robert's love for me, for our family, not once in 40 years. Even as time softened the fire of youth into the gentle routines of middle age and beyond, I would still catch him gazing at me with that familiar college-era intensity. Or at least, that's what I chose to believe. The week before everything unraveled was painfully unremarkable. We were deep into planning our anniversary celebration. 40 years, a milestone that deserved a proper party. I was busy meeting with caterers, choosing flowers, assembling the guest list. Robert seemed preoccupied, but I attributed it to stress at work. His publishing house was undergoing yet another round of restructuring, and at 65, he was feeling the mounting pressure to step aside to make room for a younger generation. One evening over dinner, we talked about it. His anxiety over fading into irrelevance, of losing the identity he had spent a lifetime shaping through his career. And then came that quiet Tuesday in spring when it all fell apart. I was in the kitchen chopping carrots for stew when Robert's phone buzzed on the counter. He never leaves it out. He's usually so careful. I glanced over, just out of habit, and saw a text. "Can't wait to see you again. Same time, same place? No name, just a number." My stomach did a little flip. I told myself it was nothing, but my hands were already moving. I swiped the screen, our anniversary date unlocked it, and there they were. Messages. Dirty ones. My heart started pounding like a drum in my chest. I dug through his wallet next and found hotel receipts, places he'd gone for business trips over the years. The dates matched up. This wasn't a one-time thing. I stood there, knife still in my hand, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. After 40 years, how could this be real? I had to know more, even if it broke me. I waited for Robert to get home, pacing the living room, rehearsing what I'd say. "Stay calm, Margaret," I kept telling myself. But when he walked in all smiles and "Hey, honey," I lost it. "Who is it?" I snapped, shoving the phone and receipts in his face. He went white as a sheet. Margaret, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, Robert. I saw the texts, the hotels, all of it. He tried to brush it off at first, fumbling over excuses, but I wouldn't let up. Watched his face change as he realized there was no way out, no plausible explanation that could cover what I'd found. Finally, he sank into the couch, head in his hands, and it all came out. For years, he'd been seeing male sex workers. It started on those business trips, a secret he buried deep. My mind spun. Robert? My Robert? The man who built our kids' treehouse and kissed me goodnight every day? Why? I whispered, my voice cracking. Why didn't you tell me? He looked up, eyes wet. I was ashamed. I didn't want to lose you, the kids. Please, don't tell them. They'll hate me. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but instead I just nodded. I won't, I said, though my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Not yet. That night, I lay next to him, wide awake. My perfect life was a lie, and I didn't know who I was anymore. The days that followed were surreal. We moved around each other like ghosts, going through the motions of our daily routines without making eye contact. I would catch him watching me sometimes, his face a mask of guilt and fear. At night, he slept in the guest room, though we didn't discuss it. I just couldn't bear the thought of him lying next to me. Questions kept me awake at night. How long had this really been going on? Was he gay? Bisexual? Had he ever loved me at all? Were our children some kind of cover story for the life he really wanted? I replayed moments from our marriage, searching for clues I might have missed. The time he seemed unusually flustered when we ran into his coworker David at a restaurant. The way he sometimes watched male athletes on TV with what I now realized might be more than casual interest. The gradual decline in our intimate life over the years, which I had attributed to age and familiarity. One morning, about a week after my discovery, I was making coffee when he came into the kitchen, looking like he hadn't slept. "We need to talk," he said quietly. I nodded, pouring 2 cups and sitting at the table. I noticed his hands trembling as he added sugar to his coffee. "I owe you an explanation," he began, his voice hoarse. "Though I don't know if any explanation is enough." "Try," I said simply. He took a deep breath. "I've known I was attracted to men since I was a teenager. But growing up in the 60s and 70s in a Catholic family in a small town, it wasn't an option, Margaret. Not for me. My father would have disowned me, maybe worse." I listened, trying to keep my face neutral despite the storm inside me. "When I met you, I fell in love. That wasn't a lie. I loved your mind, your laugh, everything about you. I thought maybe that I could make a life with you and be happy, and I was happy for a long time. But not completely," I said, my voice flat. He shook his head, tears forming. I tried to ignore that part of myself. For years, I did. But after my father died, something shifted. I started having these thoughts, these urges that wouldn't go away. And when I was on a business trip to Chicago, I gave in. "With a prostitute?" I said, the word feeling sharp in my mouth. He flinched. "Yes, it seemed safer that way. No emotional attachments, no risk of anyone finding out. I told myself it would just be once to get it out of my system." But it wasn't just once. "No," he admitted. "It became a pattern. A few times a year, always in different cities. I hated myself for it, Margaret. Every time, I swore it would be the last. But then the urges would come back, stronger than before." I stood up abruptly, almost knocking over my coffee. "Did you ever think about me during all this? About what this would do to me if I found out?" "All the time," he said, his voice breaking. "That's why I was so careful. I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "Well, congratulations on your 40-year deception. That's quite an achievement." He recoiled as if I'd slapped him. "Margaret, please." "Please what? Forgive you? Forget it ever happened? Go back to our perfect little life?" "I don't know," he whispered. "I just know I can't lose you." Something in his tone, the raw desperation in it, made me pause. Despite everything, this was still Robert. The man who had held my hand through childbirth, who had nursed me through pneumonia, who knew exactly how to make me laugh when I was down. 40 years of shared history couldn't be erased in a week. "I don't know what happens next," I said finally, "but I do know we can't sweep this under the rug. If there's any chance for us to figure this out, we need help." He nodded quickly. "Anything you want, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. And I need time," I added. "I need space to process this." "Of course," he said. "I understand." But did he? Could anyone truly understand what it felt like to have your entire reality called into question? To wonder if the life you'd built was nothing but an elaborate facade? That afternoon, I called Sarah. I didn't tell her what was going on, just that her father and I were going through a rough patch and needed some time alone. She offered to let me stay with her and her husband in Boston for a while, but I declined. Running away wouldn't solve anything. Besides, I wanted to be in my own space, surrounded by my own things, reminders of the life I thought I knew. The next day, I called a marriage counselor. The soonest appointment was in 3 weeks. In the meantime, Robert and I established an uneasy truce. We continued to sleep separately, took our meals at different times, and spoke only when necessary. It wasn't a solution, but it was a holding pattern, a pause button on our imploding marriage. 3 days before our first counseling appointment, I found myself alone in the house. Robert had gone to his weekly photography club meeting. At least, I assumed that's where he really was. The thought that he might be meeting someone else crossed my mind, but I pushed it away. I didn't have the energy for more pain right now. I wandered into his home office, a room I rarely entered. It was his space, filled with photography equipment, books on publishing, and mementos from his career. On his desk was a framed photo of our family. Next to it was an older photo, just the two of us on our wedding day, young and radiant with joy. I picked up the wedding photo, studying our faces. Was he already hiding part of himself then? Or did that come later? I set it down and opened his desk drawer, not sure what I was looking for. Inside were the usual office supplies, but at the back was a small leather journal I'd never seen before. I hesitated only briefly before taking it out. After what he'd done, privacy seemed like a moot point. The journal was about half filled with Robert's neat handwriting. I flipped to the first entry, dated 5 years ago. Started seeing a therapist today. Couldn't tell Margaret, of course. Dr. Chen seems okay, didn't judge when I finally managed to say the words out loud. I'm attracted to men. First time I've ever admitted it to anyone but myself. Felt terrifying and somehow freeing at the same time. She asked if I've ever acted on these feelings. I lied and said no. Some things are better left unsaid, even in therapy. I kept reading, entry after entry documenting his inner struggle, his shame about his encounters with male escorts, his love for me and the children, which seemed genuine despite everything, his fear of losing us if the truth ever came out, his attempts to stop, to fix himself, followed by relapses when the pressure became too much. The final entry was from just 2 weeks ago. Anniversary plans in full swing. 40 years with Margaret. I look at her sometimes and wonder how I got so lucky, and then I remember what a fraud I am. She deserves better than a husband living a double life. Dr. Chen says I should consider telling her the truth, that secrets this big destroy you from the inside out. But how can I? It would destroy her too. Better to carry this burden alone than to lay it on her shoulders. I'll try again to stop. I have to. For her, for us, for whatever time we have left. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. There was anger there, but also a complicated grief for the man I thought I knew, for the pain he'd been carrying alone all these years. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it did help me understand it a little better. When Robert came home that evening, I was sitting in the living room, the journal on the coffee table in front of me. He froze when he saw it. I found your journal, I said simply. He closed his eyes briefly, then sat down across from me. And I think there's a lot you haven't told me, about your therapy, about how long you've been struggling with this. He nodded slowly. I wasn't sure how much to unload on you at once. It seemed cruel to dump everything at once. The next few weeks were a blur. We went to counseling. Dr. Chen was kind but firm, guiding us through conversations neither of us wanted to have. Robert talked more openly about his sexuality, his struggles, the shame that had driven him to seek anonymous encounters rather than honest communication. I talked about my anger, my sense of betrayal, the loss of identity I felt now that my role as wife had been revealed as something different than I'd always believed. But inside I was burning. The therapy sessions helped, but they weren't enough. I couldn't let it go. I needed to understand how far this went. So I did something crazy. I went back to his phone and found a name. James, one of his regulars. I wavered for days before making my move. Was I really going to do this? Track down one of my husband's lovers, sex workers, whatever they were to him, was I really going to insert myself into that part of his life? But the need to know, to see for myself this shadow world he'd been living in was overwhelming. I created a new email account, something anonymous, and reached out to the number saved in Robert's phone. James, I'd like to meet. A friend recommended you. Short, ambiguous, but hopefully enough to get a response. It came later that night. Who's asking? I replied with a fake name, a brief description that could fit dozens of middle-aged men, and a request to meet in person. After some back and forth, we agreed on a time and place, a little cafe downtown, public enough to be safe, but quiet enough for a private conversation. My hands shook as I walked in, but I kept it together. He showed up, younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, handsome in a clean-cut way, with this quiet sadness in his eyes. We ordered coffee, made small talk for a few minutes. Then I took a deep breath and introduced myself properly. I'm Robert's wife. He nearly choked on his coffee. Oh God, I didn't. I'm not here to blame you, I cut in. I just need to know. How long? How many times? He hesitated, then spilled it all. Years, dozens of meetings. As he talked, I felt this weird mix of rage and something else. Loneliness, maybe. Robert had left me alone in our marriage long before I knew it. I'm sorry, James said after laying it all out. If it helps, he always spoke highly of you, said you were the best person he knew, that he didn't deserve you. I laughed bitterly. Well, he got that part right. James studied me over his coffee cup. Why are you here, Margaret? Really? What do you hope to gain from this? It was a fair question, one I wasn't sure I could answer. Understanding, I guess. Or maybe I just wanted to see you in person, to make you real instead of this faceless threat to my marriage. I was never a threat to your marriage, he said quietly. I was just a service provider, a way for Robert to explore a part of himself without risking everything else. That's a convenient way of looking at it, he shrugged. It's the truth. In my line of work, you learn to separate physical intimacy from emotional connection. It's just a transaction. Was it, though? Robert had your name saved in his phone. He saw you repeatedly over years. That sounds like more than just a transaction. James looked uncomfortable. We did develop a sort of friendship, I suppose. He would talk sometimes after, about his guilt, his confusion. I became a sort of confessor, I guess. The idea of Robert confiding in this stranger, sharing intimate thoughts he'd never shared with me, stung more than I expected. Did he ever talk about leaving? About coming out, starting a new life? James shook his head firmly. Never. He was clear that you and your family were his priority. The rest was compartmentalized. I nodded, absorbing this. It aligned with what I'd read in Robert's journal, but hearing it from James added another layer of reality to it all. What happens now? James asked. Are you going to leave him? I don't know, I answered honestly. We're in counseling, trying to figure things out. For what it's worth, James said, I think he really does love you. Whatever else he was going through, that seemed genuine. I wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. We finished our coffee in silence, then exchanged numbers. Just in case, though neither of us specified what that case might be. I didn't tell Robert about the meeting. It felt like my own secret to keep, a small rebalancing of the scales after decades of his deception. But something shifted in me after that conversation with James. The raw anger began to cool into something more complex, a mixture of grief for what was lost, uncertainty about the future, and a strange new curiosity about the man I had married, who was both familiar and a complete stranger to me now. We met a few more times after that, James and I, just talking. He told me about his life, how he'd started escorting to pay for college, how it became a career when nothing else matched the income, how he maintained boundaries between his professional and personal lives. I told him about my teaching career, my children, the little details of daily life that had filled my 40 years with Robert. It was oddly cathartic, sharing my story with someone who knew Robert in a way completely different from how I knew him. But one night, at a bar with dim lights and too much wine, he brushed his hand against mine. I didn't pull away. The touch sparked something in me. A desire to feel wanted, to be seen as a woman and not just a betrayed wife. Suddenly, I was kissing him, and then it was more. An affair, with my husband's escort. Part of me wanted revenge, let Robert see how it feels. But part of me just wanted to feel alive again. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, betraying Robert in the same way he had betrayed me, with the same person, no less. But in that moment, I didn't care. I felt desired, seen, in a way I hadn't in years. James knew exactly what to say, what to do, how to make me feel beautiful and wanted. Of course he did. It was his job. But I pushed that thought aside, lost myself in the physical pleasure of the moment. When I got home that night, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I was taking back control, but at what cost? The affair continued for weeks. Secret meetings in hotel rooms, text messages hidden behind password-protected apps, the thrill of the forbidden mixed with a growing sense of guilt. I was becoming everything I had resented in Robert. Secretive, dishonest, compartmentalizing my life into neat little boxes that never intersected. During this time, Robert and I continued our therapy sessions. He was trying so hard, being more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. He talked about his childhood, about an uncle who had made inappropriate advances when he was 13, about the strict religious upbringing that had taught him his desires were sinful and shameful. He cried openly in front of Dr. Chen and me, apologizing again and again for the pain he had caused. And here I was, continuing to deceive him, to add to the web of lies that had entangled our marriage. The hypocrisy of it ate at me, but I couldn't seem to stop. The affair with James had awakened something in me, a sense of independence, of agency over my own desires that I hadn't felt in decades. One evening, after a particularly intense therapy session where Robert had shared details about his first encounter with a male escort, I met James at our usual hotel. But something was different. As we lay together afterward, I felt hollow, empty in a way I hadn't before. "What's wrong?" James asked, stroking my hair. He was always attentive, always checking in on my emotional state. It was part of what made him good at his job, I supposed. "This," I gestured between us. "What are we doing, James? What am I doing?" He sat up, wrapping the sheet around his waist. "I thought you knew. This is about taking back power, feeling in control again." "Is it?" I asked. "Or am I just becoming as deceitful as Robert? As manipulative?" James was quiet for a moment. I think people do what they need to heal. Sometimes that's messy, not always logical or morally straightforward." "That sounds like justification for bad behavior," I said, but without heat. He shrugged. "Maybe it is. But I've seen a lot of pain in my line of work, Margaret. A lot of people struggling with who they are versus who they're expected to be. Sometimes the path through that struggle isn't clean or pretty." I thought about that as I dressed, as I drove home to the house I shared with Robert, as I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and asked about his day as if nothing had changed. Was this my path through the struggle, or was I just adding more layers of deception to a relationship already buried in lies? The turning point came a week later. Robert and I were having dinner together, actually talking, sharing bits of our days, almost like old times. He mentioned a book he was reading, recommended by Dr. Chen, about mixed orientation marriages where one spouse comes out later in life. "It's helping me understand that what I did, the lying, the cheating, that wasn't inevitable," he said, his eyes earnest. "There were other paths we could have taken if I'd been brave enough to tell you the truth years ago." I nodded, guilt gnawing at my stomach. "What does the book say about those marriages? Do they work out?" "Some do, some don't," he said. "It depends on a lot of factors, but the ones that have the best chance are built on radical honesty moving forward. No more secrets, no more hidden lives." Radical honesty. The phrase echoed in my mind as I excused myself to use the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, seeing the lines around my eyes that hadn't been there when Robert and I married, the silver threaded through my once dark hair. Who was I now? The betrayed wife seeking revenge? The empowered woman exploring her sexuality? Or just another liar adding to the damage? I made a decision then. I would end things with James. Not because I regretted what had happened, it had served its purpose, helping me reclaim a part of myself I'd thought was lost, but because continuing the deception while Robert was working so hard to be honest felt wrong, a step backward rather than forward. That night, I texted James to arrange one last meeting. We needed to talk face to face. He agreed, suggesting a park bench near the lake, neutral territory, not a hotel room or a bar. I appreciated the gesture. The next day was sunny but cool, the lake sparkling under the spring sunlight. James was already there when I arrived, feeding bits of bread to the ducks. "So," he said as I sat beside him, "this is the breakup conversation, isn't it?" I smiled ruefully. "That obvious, huh?" "I've been expecting it. You've been pulling away emotionally for a while now. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. It's not that I haven't enjoyed our time together. It's okay, Margaret, he cut in gently. I understand. This was always temporary, a way for you to process what happened with Robert. I never expected more. Still, I insisted, you deserve an explanation. The truth is, I can't keep living a double life while expecting Robert to be completely honest with me. Once it's hypocritical. James nodded. For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice, not just for your marriage, but for yourself. You're too good a person to be comfortable with ongoing deception. I don't know about that, I said. I've done my share of less than good things lately. We all have, he said simply. The question is where we go from here. We sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the ducks, enjoying the sunshine. Finally, I stood to leave. Will you be okay? I asked. Professionally, I mean, now that neither Robert nor I will be clients. He laughed softly. I'll be fine, Margaret. And for what it's worth, I hope you and Robert find a way forward that works for both of you, whatever that looks like. I leaned down and kissed his cheek. Thank you for everything. As I walked away, I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. I wasn't sure what the future held for Robert and me, whether we'd stay together or part ways, but at least I could face it honestly now, without the complication of my own secret life. I was so lost in thought that I didn't notice the man watching from across the park, didn't see the phone raised to capture the moment of farewell between James and me. I had no idea that my brief taste of deception was about to come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't imagine. Everything was spinning out of control when I got the text. It was early morning, a few days after my farewell with James, and my phone lit up with a photo. Robert with another man, no mistaking what they were doing. Then another picture. Me and James kissing outside a hotel. My breath caught in my throat. The message said, $50,000, or these go to your kids, your friends, everyone. It was Elijah, another guy from Robert's past. He had dirt on both of us and wasn't messing around. I felt sick, my hands trembling as I stared at the screen. I had to tell Robert, but how? How could I explain that I'd been having an affair with the same escort he'd been seeing, the same man I'd been silently condemning him for visiting? The hypocrisy was staggering, even to me, but there was no way around it. If Elijah sent those photos, we'd both be exposed in the worst possible way. I found Robert in his study, reviewing photos from a recent shoot. He looked up when I entered, a tentative smile on his face. Things had been better between us lately, not fixed, not by a long shot, but less strained, more honest. And now I was about to destroy that fragile progress. I need to show you something, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I handed him my phone with the blackmail text displayed. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression moving from confusion to shock to hurt as he swiped through the images. Margaret, he whispered, his voice cracking. You and James? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. How long? A few weeks, I admitted. It started after I confronted him about you. I wanted answers, and then it just happened. Just happened, he repeated flatly. Like my encounters just happened? I flinched at the comparison. No, not like that. It was different. How? He demanded, anger flaring. How was it different? Because I wasn't hiding who I was, I shot back. I wasn't living a lie for 40 years. I didn't marry you knowing I was keeping part of myself secret. We went at it, shouting, blaming each other until we both just stopped, exhausted. Robert sank back into his chair, looking suddenly old and frail. What does he want, this Elijah person? I showed him the rest of the message. 50,000, wired to an account he provided. Do you know who he is? I shook my head. The name sounds familiar, but I can't place it. Must be someone else you. Hired, Robert finished grimly. Someone else I paid for sex. He rubbed his face, the fight draining out of him. I remember him now, tall, thin, with a tattoo on his neck. I only saw him once, maybe a year ago. He was intense, made me nervous. Clearly with good reason, I said. He's been following you, photographing your encounters, and apparently mine too. Robert looked up at me, the hurt returning to his eyes. James, of all people, Margaret, why him? I sighed, sitting down across from him. I don't know. Maybe because he already knew about our situation. Maybe because he was part of your secret life and I wanted to understand that part of you. Or maybe I just wanted to hurt you the way you hurt me. Well, it worked, Robert said quietly, though I suppose I deserve it. No one deserves this, I said, gesturing to the phone. Being blackmailed, having their private life weaponized against them. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of our mutual betrayal and the threat hanging over us settling like a physical presence in the room. Then it hit us. If Elijah sent those photos, it wouldn't just ruin us, it'd wreck our kids, our whole family. We had to stop him, together. What do we do? Robert asked. I thought for a moment. We need more information. We can't just hand over $50,000 to this person with no guarantee he won't come back for more. I could call him, Robert suggested. Try to negotiate, maybe find out what else he knows. I nodded. Do it. Put it on speaker. Robert dialed the number from the text. It rang 3 times before a smooth, almost musical voice answered. Robert Sullivan, I've been expecting your call. Elijah, Robert said, his voice surprisingly steady. We need to talk about your proposal. Not much to talk about, Elijah replied. You pay. I don't send the photos. Simple business transaction. It's blackmail, I cut in. There was a pause. Ah, the missus is there too. Hello, Margaret. Enjoying your little revenge affair with James? He's good, isn't he? Professional. I felt my cheeks burn, but kept my voice level. We want to meet face to face. Not necessary, Elijah said. Just wire the money to the account I provided. $50,000 is a lot of money, Robert said. We need assurances that you'll delete the photos, that this won't happen again. Elijah laughed, a sound without warmth. Assurances? Sorry, that's not how this works. You pay for my silence. How long that silence lasts depends on my mood and your continued cooperation. My stomach churned. This wasn't a one-time payment. It was the beginning of ongoing extortion. At least meet with us, I insisted. Let's discuss this like adults. There was a long pause, then, fine, tomorrow, noon. There's a gazebo in Memorial Park, away from the main paths. Come alone, both of you, no police. The line went dead. Robert and I looked at each other, the severity of our situation sinking in. We should go to the police, he said. And tell them what? I countered. That my husband has been hiring male escorts for years, and I recently started sleeping with one of them? That would expose everything we're trying to protect, he sighed. You're right, but meeting this guy alone seems dangerous. What choice do we have? I asked. If those pictures get out, our kids will be devastated. Our grandchildren will grow up knowing their grandparents as a scandal. Is that what you want for them? Of course not, he said softly. But I'm scared, Margaret. This feels like it's spiraling out of control. I reached across and took his hand, the first time I'd initiated contact since discovering his infidelity. We'll figure it out. Together. We met Elijah in the park the next day, as arranged. The gazebo was secluded, surrounded by tall bushes that blocked it from view of the main paths. He was already there when we arrived, lounging on a bench, a small laptop bag by his side. He was exactly as Robert had described, tall and thin, with a black tattoo in the shape of a snake winding up the side of his neck. The happy couple, he greeted us with a smirk. Though not so happy these days, I imagine. Let's skip the pleasantries, I said. Show us what you have. He opened his laptop, turned it toward us. A slideshow of images began to play, Robert with various men in compromising positions, spanning what looked like years. Then me and James, not just the kiss I'd seen in the text, but more intimate moments captured through hotel windows. I felt sick, violated in a way I hadn't anticipated. How long have you been following us? Robert asked, his voice strained. Elijah shrugged. Long enough. You're not as careful as you think, Robert. Always the same hotels, the same days of the week. Predictable. He turned to me. And you, Margaret, were even easier. First-timers' mistakes. Meeting in public places, lingering touches, longing glances. Amateur hour. You're disgusting, I hissed. No, he countered. I'm enterprising. I saw an opportunity and I took it. Just business. What do you want? Robert asked. Really? Is this just about money? Elijah closed the laptop. Isn't everything? I have bills to pay, dreams to fund. Your little secrets are my ticket to a better life. $50,000 is a lot of money, I said. We'd need time to get it together. You have a week, Elijah said. And don't try anything stupid, like going to the police. I have these images set to auto-send to an interesting list of people if I don't enter a special code every 24 hours. Robert's face paled. A week isn't much time. Not my problem. Elijah said, standing up. 1 week, or your cozy little life implodes. Your choice. He picked up his laptop bag and strolled away, leaving us sitting in stunned silence. Back home, Robert and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the weight of Elijah's threat hanging between us. We can get the money, Robert said finally. I have savings, investments I can liquidate. And then what? I asked. He'll just come back for more. You heard him. This isn't a one-time payment. Robert ran his hands through his hair in frustration. And what choice do we have? I thought for a moment. We need leverage, something to use against him to make sure he can't keep blackmailing us. Like what? Blackmail the blackmailer? Robert let out a humorless laugh. Maybe, I said slowly, or at least find out more about him. Who he is, what he does, what he might have to lose if this all came out. Robert looked at me with new respect. That's actually not a bad idea, but how do we do that? I took a deep breath. We need help. From someone who knows this world better than we do. James, Robert said, understanding immediately. I nodded. James. The decision to involve James wasn't one we took lightly. It was awkward, to say the least. The three of us sitting in our living room, the strange triangle of our relationships hanging unspoken in the air. But decision made for unusual alliances. Let me get this straight, James said after we'd explained the situation. This guy Elijah has compromising photos of both of you. He's demanding 50 grand, and you think I can help? How exactly? You know people, Robert said, in your line of work. Maybe someone knows something about him, something we can use. James raised an eyebrow. You want me to ask around about a blackmailer within the sex worker community? That could put me at risk too. We understand, I said quickly, and we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. Tada, but we're talking about our family. Our children finding out about all of this in the worst possible way. James was quiet for a moment, looking between us. I'll see what I can find out. No promises. He stood up to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all this. Neither of you deserve to have your private lives exposed like this. After he left, Robert and I lapsed into an uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke. So, you and James, is it over? I nodded. Yes. It ended before the blackmail started, actually. Why? He asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. I considered the question. Because it wasn't fair to any of us, you, me, or him, and because I realized I was doing exactly what I was angry at you for doing, keeping secrets, compartmentalizing my life. Robert looked down at his hands. I never meant for any of this to happen, Margaret. Not my activities, not yours, and certainly not this blackmail situation. I know. I said softly, neither did I. We were still far from okay, our marriage hanging by a thread, but in that moment, we were united against a common threat. It was something, at least, a foundation on which to build whatever came next, whether that was reconciliation or an amicable parting. James came through for us the next day, calling with information about Elijah. His real name is Marcus Elijah Graves. He was in the escorting business for a while, but got pushed out for some unsavory practices, taking photos of clients without consent, threatening to expose them, that sort of thing. So we're not his first blackmail victims, I said. Apparently not, James confirmed. He's been doing this for years, targeting wealthy clients who have something to lose. The thing is, he's also got a record. Fraud, identity theft, even assault. He's not just a blackmailer, he's a career criminal. This changed things. If Elijah or Marcus had a criminal record, then going to the police might actually be an option, but it would still mean exposing our private lives, possibly to our children if the case ever went public. There's something else, James added. He's planning to leave the country soon. Overheard him at a bar, bragging about a big score and a one-way ticket to a country with no extradition treaty. That meant we had even less time than we thought. But it also gave us an idea. A way to trap Elijah at our upcoming anniversary party. If we could get him there, confront him with what we knew about his criminal past, maybe we could negotiate a more permanent solution, or at least buy enough time to figure out our next move. I called James, told him about Elijah, and asked for help. He agreed, maybe out of guilt. We came up with a plan. Lure Elijah to our 40th anniversary party with the promise of partial payment. James would confront him with his criminal past and grab the USB drive containing the photos. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. As the day of the party approached, Robert and I were a bundle of nerves. We'd invited all our closest friends and family, including our children and their spouses, to celebrate 40 years of marriage. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Here we were, commemorating a union that had been built partly on deception, while plotting to trap a blackmailer in the midst of our celebration. The morning of the party, I stood in front of my closet, trying to decide what to wear. Robert came up behind me, tentatively placing his hands on my shoulders. "You'll look beautiful in anything," he said softly. I met his eyes in the mirror. "Will this work? Are we doing the right thing?" He sighed. "I don't know, but I do know we're in this together now, whatever happens, and that's something, right?" I nodded, reaching up to squeeze his hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope, not necessarily for our marriage, that would take much more time and healing if it was possible at all, but for us as people finding a way forward through this mess we'd created. Our anniversary party was supposed to be a celebration, family, friends, a big cake with 40 years in icing. But Robert and I were a wreck, watching the door, waiting for Elijah. He slipped in near the end, mingling with the guests as if he belonged there. James was ready too, dressed in a sharp suit, blending in perfectly with our other friends. I was in the middle of accepting congratulations from one of my former teaching colleagues when I spotted Elijah heading toward the garden. James followed casually, keeping a discreet distance. I caught Robert's eye across the room and gave a slight nod. It was time. We excused ourselves from our conversations and made our way outside. The garden was lit with string lights, casting a soft glow over the flowers and shrubs. Elijah was standing by the small pond, admiring the koi fish swimming lazily beneath the surface. James approached him first, while Robert and I hung back, partially hidden by a large hydrangea bush. "Marcus Elijah Graves," James said loudly enough for us to hear. "Fancy meeting you here." Elijah's head snapped up, surprise and then wariness crossing his face. "Do I know you?" "Not personally," James replied smoothly, "but I know all about you. The fraud charges in Denver, the assault case in Chicago that mysteriously got dropped, the numerous blackmail attempts against clients, just like Robert." Elijah's expression hardened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" James pulled out his phone, showing Elijah something on the screen. "This is a police report with your name on it. And this," he swiped, "is an article about a similar blackmail case that matches your MO exactly." Elijah's confidence wavered visibly. "What do you want?" "The USB drive," James said. "All copies of the photos, and your word that you'll leave Robert and Margaret alone." Elijah laughed nervously. "Or what? You'll go to the police. That would expose all of us. You, Robert, even Margaret. You really want that?" "Actually," James said, "I've already spoken to a detective. Hypothetically, of course. Turns out blackmail is taken very seriously, especially when the blackmailer has an existing record. The victims might face some embarrassment, but you'd be looking at serious jail time." I couldn't tell if James was bluffing or not, but the uncertainty on Elijah's face suggested the possibility was enough to shake him. He glanced around, noticing us for the first time. "This was a setup. You lured me here." "We wanted to resolve this privately," Robert said, stepping forward. "Away from our family, our friends, one last chance to end this quietly." Elijah's hand went to his pocket, presumably where he kept the USB drive. "I want the money, at least part of it." "Not happening," I said firmly, joining Robert. "You don't get to profit from our pain." It went sideways fast. Elijah got suspicious, pulling out his phone. "One call and these photos go to everyone on my list." James stepped forward, reaching for the phone, and they started arguing loudly. Our daughter Sarah heard the commotion and ran over. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" My heart stopped. Elijah shouted, "Ask them about their secrets," before James tackled him, sending them both crashing into a hedge. In the scuffle, James managed to grab both Elijah's phone and the USB drive he'd been carrying. Elijah scrambled to his feet, fury in his eyes, but a quick glance around showed several party guests now watching the scene with interest. Outnumbered and without leverage, he straightened his jacket and stalked off, muttering threats under his breath. Sarah stood there, confusion and concern etched on her face. What was he talking about? Who was that man? Robert and I looked at each other, a silent agreement passing between us. "We've had some marriage problems," I said, keeping it vague, "but we're working on it." She didn't buy it completely, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. That seemed like more than just marriage problems, Mom. That guy was threatening you. It's complicated, sweetheart, Robert said, putting an arm around her shoulders, but it's being handled. Please, trust us on this. Today is about celebrating, not drama. She hesitated, clearly wanting to press further, but the arrival of her husband with drinks provided a timely distraction. Everything okay over here? He asked, sensing the tension. Fine, Sarah said after a moment, accepting the glass from him. Just a misunderstanding with a crasher. The party stumbled on, though Robert and I spent the rest of the evening on edge, expecting Elijah to return or for the photos to somehow surface despite James's intervention. But the night ended without further incident, our secret still intact, at least for now. Later, after everyone left, Robert and I sat on the porch, the USB crushed under my heel. We'd examined its contents briefly, enough to confirm it contained the incriminating photos, before destroying it. James had done the same with the photos on Elijah's phone before returning the device to our collection of lost and found items from the party. Did we do the right thing? Robert asked, his voice tired. I don't know, I said, staring into the dark. But we saved the family. That's something. He took my hand and I let him. We weren't fixed, but we weren't done either. Maybe that's all we could hope for. What now? He asked. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Now we keep trying. Keep talking. Figure out what our marriage looks like going forward, if it can survive this. And if it can't, then we find a way to end it with dignity, I said, with respect for what we had, for the family we built. He nodded slowly. I'd like to keep trying if you're willing. I thought about our 40 years together, the joy and the pain, the truth and the lies. I thought about the look on Sarah's face when she sensed something was wrong, about the grandchildren who adored their Papa Robert. I thought about lonely nights and uncertain futures. I'm willing to try, I said finally, but with complete honesty from now on. No more secrets, no more separate lives. Agreed, he said, squeezing my hand. Complete honesty. As we sat there in the gathering darkness, I realized that honesty might be the easy part. The hard part would be forgiveness. Not just me forgiving Robert, but both of us forgiving ourselves. For the deceptions, the mistakes, the years lost to secrecy and fear.